Hey there. Welcome to this month's episode of the Fraternus Forge podcast. My name is Mathew. I'm your host. Excited to be with you here today. It is October here in Nashville as of the time of this recording. It's a brisk 66 degrees outside. We are getting some reds and oranges and yellows on the trees. Chef's kiss. It's awesome. It's great to see. We love to see it. The guest this month is Angela Lademan. Angela is sort of a Jill of all traits. She's done a lot of things in her career, and I think one of the things that stands out the most to me about her track record is the emphasis and the focus on ministry. So for context, she studied at Franciscan University, and then from there worked in ministry as a college campus minister at Western Illinois University, a Catholic camp missionary at Camp Gray in Wisconsin, a youth and young adult minister in Northern Virginia, and then as a missionary teacher down in Belize in Central America. She's very passionate about education, encouraging people to stay on the straight and narrow, and she brings a lot of fun energy and perspective to this conversation, which I'm super grateful for. And that is the perfect segue into the topic of this conversation, which is, drumroll, modern dating. I'm excited. I'm pumped. We start in this realm of looking at conversations themselves in the dating space and in the broader social space, like how to have conversations in a way that encourage the other person to open themselves more, to go deeper, to look for those cues that they're offering you similar opportunities, and building beyond the typical, oh, what do you do for work? Oh, I do this. Wow, that's super boring sort of realm that I know we all love so much. And then from there, pivoting into a conversation about men and women's roles within the modern dating space. For men, there's a big emphasis on courage and sort of gently leading as opposed to controlling. And then for women, there's an emphasis on kindness and receptivity and recognizing that there's a deep desire within to be provided for and to be protected and pursued and sacrificed for. During the recording itself, I felt just this call to arms as a guy. I was like, yeah, I need to get out there and swing the bat a little bit more. And so if you're listening to this, I hope you feel and receive it the same way. This is a really cool conversation. I'm excited to share it with you. I think that's all that I need to say about it for now. If you have any ideas for the future of this podcast, guests that we can have on, topics that you want to hear us cover, you can send those directly to me at fraternusforge@gmail.com. Name of the podcast @gmail.com. No funky punctuation. We keep it simple here, folks. So send me those ideas, drop me a note and say, hey, would love to hear from you. I think that's it for now. Excited that you're here with me. Let's jump into it.
I feel like the old days, like before a lot of technology, before a lot of, especially dating went online, or, a time when people were in their communities and they were available and they were present.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of things worked into society that lent itself to dating because, number one, people weren't traveling as much.
Mm-hmm.
So you really got to know the people in your own community. You kind of expected maybe to stay in one place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there wasn't this feeling that we have today of the world is my oyster and I can go anywhere and meet anybody, and maybe the people right in front of me aren't good enough. There's that. There's a lot of distraction because we're not focused. It's like, I'm here, I'm there, I'm traveling, I'm all over the place. And I don't think that's helpful. Number two, I think that there were rules. There was more in society, there were more things that you knew how you were supposed to behave. You knew how you were supposed to interact with people. There was a way that you spoke to elders and the way that you respected them. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. There was an expectation of how you treated men and women. You don't let a girl walk to her car by herself. You hold things for her or carry things for her. So it was like worked into just how you were raised as a man or a woman to fulfill those sort of natural roles that I really do believe that we have. So men were forced, maybe that's a bad way to put it. Men were taught from a young age to protect and to provide.
Yes.
They're not anymore. Women were raised to care for a home. So they were already thinking like, okay, like, all right, I need to learn how to cook. I need to learn how to maintain a home. I was reading this book called The Dressmakers. I think that's what it's called.
The Dressmakers.
I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
And it was a book about how fashion changed throughout the years. And it was fascinating to me because they talked about how during the war, it was hard to come by, material was hard to come by, or even to buy things. So they were taking men's suits and tailoring them to women's clothing.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things in there, too, is they were just talking about how because we didn't have a lot of resources, like children from a young age, and especially girls, were taught how to budget and how to manage a home because the father wasn't always going to be there. There might be away at war, and you're going to have to know how to manage a household. So one of the assignments that kids would get is that they would have to go home and say, okay, if we have to clothe 5 children, it doesn't make more sense to buy an outfit at this price or remake it or reuse clothes or pass down clothes. I don't know. So there was just a lot of what you did, what you learned in school, what you learned in family was how to live well. And how to interact. Yeah.
I think that emphasis on living well is a good one and kind of lies at the heart of a couple of those points. This idea of managing a household in particular, what I'm thinking of, like, my guess is you probably have grandparents who experienced maybe the tail end of the Great Depression or were like really young kids. And same's true for me. And I feel like that experience shaped how they raised their kids, which would have been our parents.
Yeah.
And our parents, I don't know if yours are anything like mine, like my mom never threw anything away. Like still calls me to this day, like, hey Matt, I found this piece of paper in the trash that has your writing on it. And it's like, listen, Mom, that was me scribbling like a note at work. It's not anything important. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because I have 4 shoe boxes full of these and I want you to go through to them at some point.
Aww.
And I feel like that sort of like tendency to save and care for things and plan for things played into how relationships sort of formed and were forged. Yeah. It wasn't always like the biggest, flashiest thing, although like attraction is important, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not, but there's also an element of, is there safety in this? Is there stability in this?
Yeah.
I don't know, does that track?
No, definitely, because I think it was really, we were raised to eventually have families. I think that's a lot of how people lived because that was a normal and it was good for society. So a lot of what you did was, okay, how do we function in a family? How do you function in society? Because that's what we're going to do. We don't think like that anymore. Now it's like, it's all about me. And I don't know if I want to have a family. So it doesn't, like, I don't need to have good relationships with my parents or my siblings because actually, like, I don't really get along with them. And I don't really care because I can just go and, I don't know, live with my boyfriend and do my thing and not have to think about anybody else because it's just hard to work through relationships. But I think naturally when you have a family, it brings you closer to your parents and your siblings. Like I know, like for my sister, I have several sisters that are married. 3 of them are married. And I, like, just the fact that they have children has brought me closer to them. Even though we're, like, already close. But I love, like, it just brings a whole new dynamic to our family life. And just wanting, like, as a parent or as an aunt, just wanting to be close to them and wanting to be a part of their lives. And so I think if my sisters didn't have kids, like say they were just married and it was just them and their husband, I just don't think there would be as much for me to...
Like a draw.
Yeah, because it's sort of like that's your life and you guys are living your life. I'm not really a part of it. But with the nieces and nephews, it brings my sisters joy to know that I'm invested in their lives. Yeah. And that I'm present and that I'm there.
That's a really good point. It's sort of like, I mean, part of my brain like really likes comparing things to like tribal, prehistoric sort of metaphors. It's sort of like the young in any sort of colony, whether we're talking humans or some other animal species. I think some animal comparisons are helpful, but it's like the young are vulnerable, need to be protected. It's like for the future of the herd. And so the fact that your siblings have daughters and sons, there may be something biological, instinctual in there that's sort of like, hey, like, go and protect.
I've never thought about that either.
Possibly.
But
Possibly.
Yeah.
Is there another element to that? Like, I'm wondering sort of what drives that.
I don't know. There's just something that changes because there's just, you need that family support when you have kids. It's hard to have kids. It's not easy.
Right.
And so even just the, like, I can go visit, my sister's like, great, I can go shopping, leave you with kids, and I'm having a great time because I never get to see them, you know? So I do think it's just a matter of, like, we can't really function on our own, even though today we want to think that we can. But I think that's a lot of why we have the depression and all the just sort of loneliness that we have today, is that we keep thinking and we're told that we're supposed to stand on our own and we don't need anybody. And I'm my own person and I need to just do it myself. And I don't think that helps anybody because it doesn't foster relationships. It doesn't foster joy. It doesn't foster hope. I don't know. There's just so much to human interaction, especially within a family and relationships, good, healthy relationships, that bring out the best in us and bring out the most in our lives. So when we cut those things off and they're not important to us anymore, what else is there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like we didn't make it, again, I'm going to bring it back to like the species sort of thing. Like it's did you say that's what we're made for? Was that a phrase that you used?
I don't know.
Okay, I feel like it was. I feel like that's the idea that you're getting at.
Yeah.
This sort of like connection, this familial connection is something that we're built for, and when we like push against that through independence or selfishness or whatever the case may be, it leads to those depressions because in some way we're denying the instincts that have gotten us to this point. Like natural selection has brought us here through those processes, and now we have a culture. Not to blame everything on culture. I think part of it is human nature as well. Like we kind of want stuff for ourselves.
Yeah.
We kind of want, like, I mean, I'll be honest, I want my own space sometimes.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah, but like I think operating from those places, to your point, leads to the depression. Like if I'm of the mindset that I can do this by myself and I don't need family, I think that's a slippery slope to be on.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about like rules or maybe sort of expectations in terms of our roles. Like men were expected to protect and to provide, women were expected to care for a home. How do we see that play out in the dating space? So like let's say that it's a mixer, let's say that it's a party at somebody's house, and you've got a bunch of eligible men and women just kind of mingling about and interacting with each other. What does that look like in our parents' or maybe grandparents' generation? Yeah. And how has that been warped and twisted in that circumstance now?
So this is just a funny example, but it was one that made me stop and think. When we first sort of started building community here in Nashville, especially during COVID in 2020, we did a lot of brunches. Yeah. We were just hanging out at each other's houses a lot because nothing was open. There was nothing else to do. And I actually loved it. I think I'm the only person who was like, COVID was great. Because for me, it was an experience of just being in people's homes. And we were just spending time together. We didn't have all the distractions that we face generally with our jobs and with traveling and all these different things. And people were just so wanting community. But anyways, the point of this being is we would these boys would host these brunches. I loved it. We'd go, they're listening to music, they're cooking up a storm. Yeah. But I became known as the champagne girl.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
I have not heard of this. Okay.
Because I think one time I brought champagne because they just already had whatever they needed for brunch. And so I was like, okay, quick thing to pick up the champagne, bring it. And it just sort of became my role. It was like, Angela brings the champagne, like somebody else brings something else. Okay. But then I realized every girl that came brought something store-bought. Okay. They brought the fruit. They brought the champagne. They brought, I don't know, ready-made muffins. They brought something that I just felt like, as a woman, that actually made me really sad that I wasn't contributing to the meal. other than just buying a bottle of champagne. Like, I was like, this is shameful. Like, I should be doing something.
Okay.
So when I sort of realized this, I was like, okay, I'm going to make it a point to bring something homemade every time. Because, number one, that's who I want to be. I've actually, like, I would love to be a good cook.
Okay.
I feel sad that I don't have the time to learn to cook. And I don't have sad to prepare good meals.
Okay.
So the point of that being is that I feel like we don't have as many opportunities to show our abilities or capabilities or gifts and talents that are uniquely men and women. Not that men aren't good cooks and all that; they're wonderful. Yeah. But as a woman, it's like that's something exciting to share when you make a good meal.
Yeah.
And somebody appreciates that, and especially a man. Like, there is something to that it's like it gives you such a sense of pride and joy that somebody enjoyed your meal.
Yeah.
So we don't really have that. Like, we're not able to sort of share those gifts like we used to. It used to be, and I don't know, I like how I'm saying used to be. It's like, what era am I talking about? I don't even know. But just thinking about various ways in the old days or days before now that not having all the distractions was a good thing, because it used to be maybe, somebody's maybe performing like the music instead of listening to the radio.
I was going to say
somebody's reading a book out loud. Somebody's reciting poetry. They're sharing something about themselves that we don't really do. Like, most people probably don't know I do photography. Most people probably don't know I sing. Most people probably don't know that I do play piano and guitar a little bit. These are things that it's just like I've never had the opportunity to share that with people.
Yeah, definitely. I love how you brought in like the arts to that conversation. I have a question that I want to ask here in a minute that I'm excited for. But when you sort of brought gifts into the equation in this sort of mingling interaction of single men and women, my thought jumped immediately to like being a piano player. So like you were at my show back in March, which thank you for being there. That was super kind of you. That was a lot of fun. But that honestly is one of maybe 3 or 4 times this year that I've played the piano for people, because you go to a party and like you said, there's music on. Like, who are you going to listen to, Drake or me? Like, let's be real.
I'd rather listen to you.
Hey, thanks. I gave you not my favorite artist, and that felt like a slow pitch. Appreciate you. Yeah. And there's so many examples of that. Yeah. Like, there's a TV now, so there's no need for entertainment. Yeah. There's no need for someone to stand up and be like, okay, let's recite a play together. Yeah. Y'all remember Shakespeare, or you remember this? Like, let's interact together instead of staring at the tube. Yeah. I've been to a ton of different like events on Sundays where it's just like people sitting around, hey, let's get together. And like, these are folks who out loud say, oh yeah, let's get like our single friends together and we'll have a party or like a get together or something. And it literally just turns into like 10 or 12 people sitting around watching football. Yeah.
And you're not sharing yourself with each other. You're not discovering each other. Because I even think like that brings a whole nother dimension of like interest and desire. Is that like I'll always remember my sister when she was dating her now husband. I remember her going to visit him for Christmas. It was the first time she was really spending time at his childhood home. And when she came back, she was like, oh yeah, I want to marry this man. And I was like, wow, like what changed? She's like, well, it's not that anything had changed, but she just got a sense of like, he's an artist. And she's just like, I don't know, she's like just sitting on the couch with his mom, and like seeing the things that he's created. It's just like a whole other side of him. Yeah. That yes, she had seen, but she hadn't really gotten to explore. Yeah. And we're not sharing that with each other. So a lot of times I hear that a lot. People are just like, oh, nobody's interesting here. And you're like, well, do you actually know that? Like, have you taken the time to ask questions? Have you taken the time to discover who that person is, rather than, hi, I'm Angela and I work in insurance. Yeah, that's boring. That's why I don't like to talk about my job. I hate that that's like all that people know about me sometimes, because it's not anything that brings, it doesn't speak to anything about me. It really doesn't. It's just my job. It's how I make money. But other than that, like, it brings nothing else to my life. For me. Some people do. If you're talking to Tim Hepburn, we can talk forever on insurance. We love you, Tim. And hey, it brings him much joy. If you're speaking to me, it does not bring me joy. So the conversation ends there. Where you're talking about kickball, or Michigan, I'm like, hey, well, what made you interested in kickball? Like, how did you get into that?
Mm-hmm.
What do you like about it? Michigan, why Michigan? Oh, I'm from Michigan. I have family there, or my best friends are there, and we get together every summer.
Right.
It's a big deal. It gives you a window to like start discovering their life. And not to say that a job can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely can, but I do think a lot of times a job stops at the job.
Yes.
And there's not a whole lot else you can do there.
People are, it's like, it's the lazy question to ask at like a party or I was going to say engagement, but like just some sort of function. Yeah. It's so easy to just be like, hi, I'm so-and-so, what do you do? But like, to your point, that's not really a question that invites a discovery of the person. Yeah. Something that we talked about during that dinner that was almost with Father Phi was questions that lead to better conversations. And I think one of them that might be worth trying is, I use this one a lot. You may have actually heard me use this one. What are you most excited about in the next 3 to 6 months?
Oh, yeah.
And like, because if you can get the person talking about something that they're excited about, then I feel like that's an opportunity to really let who they are shine. Because if it's something that they're excited about, or like most excited about, then it's like, oh, dang. Yeah. Like you sort of get to see that person come alive a little bit in front of you. Does that track?
Absolutely. And it gives you an opportunity to connect with them, an opportunity to share maybe a common interest. Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of people that I just, you kind of see, you don't really know them until you have a conversation with them. And you're like, wait, me too? Like I think it's C.S. Lewis. There's a quote that he says in, I wish I could remember how it goes. It's something like, friendships are between people who can say, wait, you too? I don't know. I just love that, where it's like this discovery really cool. Of like, there's something about you that speaks to me that, I don't know how to explain it. I just love the quote. I wish I knew what it was, because it's much better than what I just said. But just basically that, like, wow, me too. Like that sharing, that common sharing is so important. Right. So special and so beautiful. But if you never ask, you're not going to know that. You're not going to have those connections with people. And I do think that's why a lot of people don't connect today. They're not asking questions. And they don't know how, to be honest. Okay. I mean, that's the whole point of conversation. That's the whole point of human interaction, is to constantly be drawing people out, is to constantly be learning more and more and more and more about them. That's why, like, even in a marriage, it's not like you learn everything about that person and then you marry them and you don't learn anything about them. You're constantly learning about a person. And in a marriage, it's like, I might know everything about you, per se, but now I'm learning who you are in this new experience. I'm learning who you are as a spouse. I'm learning who you are as a mother or as a father. So you're constantly learning about them. And you have to constantly be considering that and learning about that. And what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the world? Yeah. And it's important. Like, people are really missing out when they don't ask questions. It's like going back to this idea of like asking about a job and the job stopping there. I heard a statistic once that 7 out of 10 people in the United States do not find passion or meaning in the work that they do. Now, that's pretty sad. I think it's accurate. I mean, for a lot of us, a job is just the way that we earn money, so we can do things. And I don't think a job is who somebody is. And I think that's what you're getting at. And understanding that on a deeper and deeper level is foundational for forging a relationship. Yeah. So asking those questions when you're in those initial stages of interacting with people is really, really important. Yeah. Why are so many people like, so if that's foundational, why are so many people like not doing that? Because we're in a society that's really self-absorbed. Like, I cannot tell you. It's actually sometimes sort of a game of mine. Okay. I ask questions. Okay. And I ask questions, and the person answers. And I ask another question, the person answers. And at some point, I stop asking questions. And then that person is like, oh, so what do you do? Oh, how was your week? Like, it literally, I can have like one-sided conversation basically for people for a very long time. This is very common, unfortunately, where I'm asking, but they don't think to be like, but what about you? Or to like bring me back in the conversation. So it's just constantly me trying to draw them out, but them never realizing that they're not turning it back to me, which is another part of the art of conversation. A conversation is boring when you're just interrogating somebody, right? It should be like, wow, I like, okay, so say you're talking to a musician, like, hey, where do you play? What do you do? Like, oh, I do this, that, and the other thing. And then they just stop there and they've talked about themselves. Not like, hey, do you play anything?
Right.
And it's like, oh, actually I do. Actually, sometimes I'll play down at such and such a place. Oh my gosh, I love that place. Like, it keeps feeding the conversation so it can keep going, and that person discovers you as well, which is also important. I can leave, sadly, I can often leave a party where I've talked to so many people so empty because they didn't ask me a single thing. Yeah. You're like, that is, I have that experience so often. Just curious, what Myers-Briggs type are you? Have you taken Myers-Briggs? Yes, and I don't remember. Okay. I think it's like, what, feeling, sense, I don't remember. It's pointless for me to try to string it because I don't know what it is. Gotcha. I think, well, so if we're the same type, because what you said sounds a lot like my type, which is the INFJ. Okay. And I experience that at parties, and one of the downsides, just fun fact, of the INFJ, or something to watch out for, are people who, they call them emotional dialysis machines. Oh. And that's a more toxic version of what you're describing. I think what you're describing is just more people being oblivious. Yeah. But the INFJ can get into this position where they're like a good listener, asking questions, which it sounds like you do. And then not only is this person like oblivious of like what the INFJ is doing for them, like by asking the questions, they also sort of like take advantage of it and just use it as an opportunity to just talk and ramble and like dump a bunch of stuff. So that's a little side tangent. Might not even make it on, but but yeah, like I totally get what you're saying. Like I've been there many, many times at like a party or something. I like to think of it as you've got like a soccer ball or like some sort of ball in between you. You sort of like kick it, and by asking a question, it's sort of like you kicking it to the other person and say like, hey, do something with this. Yeah. And it's sort of their opportunity. I feel like what you're describing is the person gets the ball and they just dribble it. Yeah. And they just dribble it and dribble it and dribble it. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, you sort of like kick them another ball, and they like put aside the first one that you gave them and they start dribbling that one. Yeah. You're like, I'm still here. Yeah, I'm still here. Do you want me to still be here? Because I can really walk away. And sometimes I've done that. Right. Yeah. Okay, well, see ya. Yeah. Nice talking to you. Yeah. It's better when there's like a balance. Like when people express that curiosity and it's sort of reciprocated and it comes back. And it's good for both of them. It's also like, that's part of the sadness for me, actually, is not that like, okay, nobody learned anything about me, but it's like, that's what's going to form their relationships in every way. Like if you don't learn how to be interested in other people, you're not going to have deep and meaningful relationships. It's always going to stop at the like, well, that person didn't take an interest in what I did today, so I guess we have nothing to say. It's like, no, like maybe it wasn't about you today. Yeah. Often it's not about us, and often like people aren't going to want to stick around if you just talk about yourself. And I'm saying this in such a blanket way. Like there's so many wonderful people I know, and I've had wonderful conversations. I do want to make that caveat, but it is something that you can frequently experience. And especially in dating, that happens a lot, especially on dating apps. Oh my gosh, if we even want to go to dating apps, I can't tell you the number of times I'm like, hey, how are you? Like, great. Like, great. How was your day? Oh, mine was great. I'm like, okay, so what do you do for work? You know, this. And I'm like, okay, like, give me something. And then I'm like, hey, so tell me about yourself. Silence. Like, they have no, like, well, actually, that is not helping my point, actually. But it's the point that they just have no idea to ask the question, how to ask, and how to engage, and how to move it forward. Right. It's like okay, like, I guess if you make this super easy for me, like, how was your day? I can say good. What do I do for work? Oh, I know the answer to that question. Like, right, just, I don't know. But it's sad for me because I want people to have deep and meaningful relationships. It's because I know the value of the times that I've been able to sit and talk for hours with people and realize, like, oh my gosh, 5 hours have gone by.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Like I've had that experience so many times.
It's a great feeling.
It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
And you leave really full. You leave, even if you didn't talk about yourself that much, it's just like such a wonderful experience to get to know somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it's really important.
I think you're really onto something here. It's sort of like a conversation is the process by which like two human beings sort of like open themselves up to each other, and questions and keeping the conversation going is a way, and it's most fruitful when like both humans get that opportunity, because like they both want to see the other person open, but they also want to open themselves and be seen.
Yeah.
And so when you're asking questions and one person is opening, but they're not giving you the opportunity to open, that's not fruitful. It doesn't feel good. It's like, well, I'm glad you feel seen. That's great. But I also would like to feel seen. And I think that's true for everybody.
That, and giving that person the opportunity to like change you in some way. Because like, I love it when I'll have a conversation with somebody and I'm like, wow, why is this person so easy to talk to?
Yeah.
Or they bring out a side of me that I'm like, oh, wow, this person made me like really, I don't know, bring out my humor or my sarcasm or whatever it is. Like, I love that when I can interact with somebody and be like, wow, like I don't get to talk to people like this every day.
Yeah.
So you've brought out a side of me that I like.
I'm not, yeah.
And so like, even depriving me of that, just being able to like, hey, like I want you to dig into me. Like what can you bring out of me?
Right. Yeah. I was talking with a friend about that earlier. It's sort of like having an opportunity to sort of calibrate into a place where you're being more vulnerable. Like I like something that I've said before to certain friends is like, I like the me that I am around you.
Yeah.
I like the me that you bring out. And that I think sort of gets at the heart of what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for folks in the dating pool, or for folks who are in that space trying to relate to one another, what are some practical tips that we can give to folks? I feel like we should also talk about things like dancing and other activities, ways of sort of putting yourself in a position where like romance might be possible.
Yeah.
But for conversation specifically, I feel like we've talked about some of it, but let's see if we can boil it down. Like, what do you think some practical tips are?
Give yourself a number. Like, if you find that you're the type of person who talks about yourself a lot.
Okay.
Well, number one, maybe ask yourself that and think,
okay,
how do I interact with people? Am I the one talking or am I the one listening?
Okay.
And then if you find that you're the one talking all the time, and not like talking, drawing somebody out, but just like, oh, here's what I did, blah, 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 then maybe give yourself a number of like, okay, I'm going to approach this person and I'm not going to talk about myself until I've asked them 5 questions.
As like a bar you got to get over.
Yeah, just something that like maybe challenges you to like maybe give yourself sort of a like, wait, am I like present to other people? Am I a listener? Because it's important to be a listener if you're going to be a good conversationalist. Because number one, you have to listen to what they're saying to be able to know what to respond to. Or to have something else to say.
Yes.
So if you're not listening, it's just this constant like spouting things out.
Okay.
And we've all had those conversations where you're like, wait, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because you know they're just not listening to you and they just start talking because they just think they need to fill up the space.
Right.
Because they're not listening to what you said, so they're not responding appropriately.
That's like if you're kicking the ball back and forth between each other, it's sort of like the person passes you the ball and you're like looking off in the other direction. You're not looking at the ball. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so asking yourself that question, am I a listener or am I a talker? Or do I have a good balance of those things? Because you do need to be both. There's also people where you just talk and they just listen and you're like, okay, well, I want to bring you into the conversation too. So, and that's a challenge. And, you know, you might be more comfortable on one or the other, but that's the challenge. We're always trying to learn how to balance everything in our lives. Same thing with conversation of like, how do I contribute, but how do I also listen? It's such a valuable thing in every relationship you have.
Yeah.
Exactly. Actually, eye contact. That's huge. Like, how often do people really feel like people are looking at them and listening? Like, when you're sitting there talking to somebody and they're constantly looking around the room, that's so hurtful.
Right.
Like, why am I so uninteresting to you that you can't look at you can't look me in the eye, you know? So I think that's a really important thing. Practical, like, I don't know.
I could jump in here.
Yeah.
I like both of those a lot. So eye contact is huge.
Yep.
Striking that balance, sort of understanding where your baseline is, Like I come from maybe a more listening space, or I come from a more talking space, than looking for ways to, okay, well, if I'm more of a listener, I need to find ways to like share more.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I feel like part of the reason, I know you said people are self-absorbed, and that's why questions don't get asked. But then I think also part of the reason why we don't share is because we're scared.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I talked with Brendan McCauley about this the other day, and we might have to do a separate podcast on this, but that vulnerability is really scary for me sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I'll be in conversation with somebody and it's like, I want to open up to you, but I'm afraid that if I open myself up and you see this part of me, you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
And like, it's not going to draw you closer to me. It's going to push you away.
Yeah.
So I feel like vulnerability is still really important. Like even if you open yourself to somebody and it does push them away, it's better to know that, you know, like, because not everything that we share with others is going to be received, is going to be something that draws us closer together.
Right.
But it's that practice of doing that that helps us, I think, become more comfortable in our own skins. Like, this is who I am.
Yeah, definitely.
And then it also is the only way that you're going to find people who you do click with.
Yeah.
Because you could share yourself with nobody and then you have no friends.
Right.
Or you could share yourself more openly and you will push some people away, but you are going to draw those people who are like, oh, you kickball Michigan? Yeah. Same.
But you also don't know even when you feel like it's pushing somebody away, you never know when you're actually challenging somebody and giving them something to think about that they've never thought about before, that they might be uncomfortable with.
That's true.
But it's really necessary to say.
Yeah.
And I think we shouldn't shy away from that, because I think that's important as well. And that's an important part about conversation as well, is just, like you said, being very honest.
Mm-hmm.
And letting people receive it how they're going to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have to have some social graces.
Right.
I know some people are just like, they love to argue, and you're like, okay, not helpful. But there are times when it's like, okay, we're having a real honest conversation, and not being afraid of how they're going to receive it, in that, like, you are sharing who you are.
Yeah.
And you can't help how somebody's going to respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't ever have to talk to you again. It's fine.
Right. It's like out of my control. As long as I showed up to that interaction respectfully and kindly, as long as I wasn't obscene or hurtful in the way that I shared myself, then the response of the other person is, in a way, not my problem. Like, I can only control what's in my realm. Yeah. Is that sort of?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
I have one more thought here, and then we should talk a little bit more about, like, some of those edge cases, like dancing and such.
Sure.
Something that really helps me when I'm talking with somebody, I forget the guy's name. I think it's Jim Collins. He's like a business author. I think he wrote Good to Great and Built to Last. Something that he says is, strive to be interested, not interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like, going back to your point earlier about folks being self-absorbed, I feel like that is folks trying to be interesting and like impressive.
Absolutely.
Like, look at me, look at all the cool stuff that I can do. Look at how awesome my day was. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Yeah. And actually, like, sometimes when I'll be in a conversation with someone, I'll think the word podcast in my head. And what that does is it sort of puts me in a position where my objective is to, like, give this person opportunities, like, watch the ball and, like, look for opportunities to kick it to them and be like, here's a nice little slow one. This is something I feel like you could hit. This is something I feel like you could hit. Yeah. And actually, I won't say that it's, like, the secret of life by any means, but I do feel like it's an underrated superpower in this climate that we're living in, because so many people are self-absorbed. If you give them that opportunity to kick the ball around, you just keep giving it to them. Like, people love talking about themselves. Yeah. And granted, there are going to be some people who just ramble and ramble and ramble, and you got to know when that's happening and pull the chute on that conversation. But there are going to be people who, like, know how to have a good conversation. You open them up first and they're going to be like, okay. Right. Okay, and then they might kick you the ball back. Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about the conversational dynamic, like asking questions as a mechanism for opening people up, being sort of detached from the outcome of those interactions. Eye contact is huge, and then being vulnerable in how we share ourselves. How about other, I guess, pathways or activities that used to be more common things like dancing, for example, and I'd be curious to know if you have other examples that you're thinking of. How do we show up? Because I mean, it's one thing to go to a party and have a conversation with some people.
Yeah.
How do we put ourselves in a position where we're open to like romance and one of those deeper connections?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like dancing might be one way, which I'm really scared of, but hey, what else?
Yeah, I mean, any of those, just giving yourself physical activities to do with each other.
Okay.
Because we're both physical, spiritual, emotional beings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just talking to somebody all the time, there's only so much you learn about them.
Mm-hmm.
So, dancing, I mean, I love dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people don't, but again, like you can see how we've lost that, and that's why there's such a fear. Because look at our dancing today. It's like you're not well. Okay, it depends on how you're dancing. But okay, dancing. All right, how do I want to describe this? Okay, if you're dancing like any traditional type of dance, salsa, swing dancing, country line dancing, two-step, any of that, you're literally in somebody's arms.
Yeah.
But in a very good, wholesome way.
Yes.
Like you're supposed to have structure.
Yes.
You're only supposed to be so close.
Yes.
And you're supposed to have an appropriate sort of give and take.
Mm-hmm.
A man really does need to lead or it doesn't work.
Yes.
And I've been there many times where I'm like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And I start doing, they're like, Angela, why are you leading? And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm so sorry. Let me show you how to do it. And then you lead. Okay? All right. But
give me your man card. I'm going to cut this up in front of you and then we'll continue.
Yeah. So, but I love that because you're learning something together. Every time I dance with somebody, I have to relearn how to dance because they have a different sort of structure, different style. Like everybody has different, like even though you might learn the same moves, I have to relearn how they sort of, how they lead it. And it's constantly me reading people.
Yeah.
Which I love that because it's a challenge to me to be like, okay, I have to be really in tune to this person, especially when we first start dancing. What are the cues? What are the ways that he touches me or pulls me or whatever it is that is giving me the indication of where we're going next? And a lot of people don't know how to do that. So it's a learned skill to let somebody lead you. Okay. And it's a learned skill to lead. Okay. And then it's a further learned skill to do it together and to do it well. And I think that's so beautiful because that's what we're constantly doing as men and women. Yeah. We are different. Yeah. We are. And we complement each other and we bring a different side of each other out that if we're not constantly learning how to work together, that's why we have so much friction between the sexes. And that's why there's such a problem with me trying to be a man and then trying to be women. It's like there's a problem here. Like I need you to be a man, Mathew. I need you to be a man.
I'm trying. I can't
be. Do a great job. Because my womanhood can't be brought out in the same way if I'm not around good men. Like it's not. And that's like, to be honest, like I grew up with a bunch of cousins who are just incredible men. So
was one of them at the red, white, and blue party, Chris?
Oh yeah, my cousin Chris. Yeah.
I did get that salt of the earth kind of vibe from him. Yeah.
Good man. Yeah, but what I loved about growing up with them, I mean, they were cousins and they were boys, and I was their cousin, so you get roughed up and all the good stuff, and but for the most part, they really were raised to be gentlemen, and I just sort of expect that. So when I wasn't with them, it was starting to unlearn the good habits that I had with them. For instance, my cousin Daniel and I were in college together, and I remember I just hung out with him so much, and he'd always open the door for me. Yeah. He was always like looking out for me, making sure that I was okay. He would always come and dance with me. Just so kind and so aware. Yeah. I remember walking out of a class one time. It was probably like my sophomore year of college, talking to a guy. Yeah. And I walk up to the door and just instinctually I just stopped. And then and he's talking and I'm talking. And I stop, and so he stops. And then all of a sudden I realized we're stopped at the door. And it was this, we both immediately kind of realized like, oh my gosh, Angel, let me get the door for you. Like I just instinctually stopped because my cousin always got the door for me. So I didn't even think about it. And as soon as we both realized that, I was like, oh, we're awkwardly standing here and he's not opening the door for me. And then he awkwardly realized he wasn't opening the door for me, but it wasn't instinctual for him to open the door, even though it was the like, oh yeah, I should be opening the door for her.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
I don't know. And that was a beautiful way to grow up because my cousins weren't doing it for any gain.
Yeah.
They just did it because I was a woman. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we've really lost. I feel like men pull out their chivalry only when they want to date a woman. So when you're a woman who doesn't get asked out very often, you kind of start to stop feeling like a woman. Because you're like, well, they're not going to walk me to my car. They're not going to open the door. They're not going to make sure I have a drink at a party. They're not going to pay for my drink or think to do that ever. You know, not that I'm saying ever, but it can be where you, today it's like they think that those good habits, those good, I don't want to call them habits, what do you call manners, are only things that you do when you're trying to win a woman. But what was beautiful about going back to the old days, those were things you treated, every man was supposed to treat every woman that way. So a brother was supposed to take care of his sister that way. We've definitely lost that. And I feel like I've had guys who have like sat there and told me about what a great guy they are when they're dating a woman. And I'm listening, and listening. And I'm like, well, but you don't treat me that way. And I'm not asking them to like pay for my meal or to like, I'm not asking them to date me, but I'm like, you're not listening to me. You're not asking me questions. You're not opening the door for me. I don't feel like a woman around you. And I think that's a problem, because what a lot of people are finding is guys do all these things to win a woman, but because they're not habits, they really aren't habits, because they're not doing it for every woman they encounter, their mom, their sister, their grandma, the random woman walking across the street. Is what happens, then they get married, they don't have to win this woman anymore. And so they're no longer, those habits fall off again. They're no longer being that.
This was a costume that I wore for a little while. That type of thing.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I see some of what you're describing, and I experience it in my own personal life. Like this question of like motives, I think is really interesting. I'm aware, painfully aware, of when I'm interested in somebody, pretty much everything that I do is trying to like build some sort of goodwill, build some sort of opening.
Yeah.
And I think some of those behaviors do come out. I have seen that. And I feel like there's a line between like leading in a natural sort of capacity, like embracing the typical masculine role that sort of leads and provides and protects, versus this more controlling, if I push these buttons, I will get this result sort of capacity. Yeah. And I feel like they're related, because like leading is sort of like, it's setting some sort of direction. Like if you think of dance, you're setting some sort of direction for you and the person that you're with. And control, in another way, is like setting that direction. It's like forcing a direction as well. So I'm wondering, how are those different? Like, as a man, what would you hope to see from me? How do I lead without controlling, I guess is a better way to ask the question.
Well, a lot of it, it's just, number one, consistency. Again, like, I often, like, I want to see how a man treats his friends who are girls. I want to see how a man treats his sister. I want to see how he treats, like I said, just the woman walking across the street, or, because that's going to be really telling of, like, is this just a part of who he is and how he lives, and a part of the virtue that he's built? Because it is a lot of virtue that is worked into that. It's selflessness.
Gotcha.
A lot of what happens today, I think, is that we have these ideas of like, yeah, if I'm a man, I have to be the leader. I have to do this, that, and the other thing. But it's also in the way that you lead. Like, I know I've had people be like, I don't know, this is just an example. Like, I was moving a table one time. It was Thanksgiving, and I don't know, everybody's everywhere, and it just needed to get done, and it's fine. Like, I do that stuff all the time. I have a cousin who's pretty, well, doesn't matter. So my cousin walks in, he's like, Angela, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, where are all the men? They should be doing this. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's fine. If they were around, I would have asked them to do that. If they weren't around, I was just going to do it.
Sure.
But the way in which he did it wasn't loving. It wasn't protecting. It was like, you should not be doing this. Instead of like the other approach of like walking, like, oh, Angela, let me help you with that. Who can like decline that? It's just like, you are here to serve me, not to tell me what I can and cannot do.
Okay. So it's sort of like offering a path, offering a potential, instead of like adding boundaries. Is that right?
I mean, I guess so. I think it's just more of a like, it's a mindset of like, not like, why are you getting angry at me for just trying to get something done? I'm a practical person. It's just like, let's just get this done, rather than being like, hey, I'm here, like, let me help, let me, you know, let me provide, let me make your life easier, let me help you in some way.
Let me serve you in some way.
Yeah, same thing. Like, I don't know if you want to walk a girl to the car, like, a lot of girls aren't used to that. And I will say, like, I do understand that men are in quite a bind today, because it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, you know, like, no matter what. So I do get that. Because
a guy could walk a girl to her car, and she might receive that as a signal, like, oh, this guy's trying to demonstrate his value. This guy's trying to impress me.
Yeah.
Like, he might be, like, whereas the guy might actually be doing that just for the sake of doing that.
Right.
Like, because it's the right thing to do. Is that what you mean?
I mean, kind of. Well, I guess it's just really in the way that you do it. Like, so I think it's always good to always choose to do the right thing that you really believe is right, regardless, again, of how people are going to receive it.
Sure.
So as a man being like, I really do want to walk a woman to her car. Like, this is just kind of a funny example, but I can't think of anything else. But like, okay, so a lot of women might be like, no, I'm independent. I can do it myself. I'm fine. Okay. But if you walk out and you're like, I'm walking you to your car, the girl might be like, it's fine. You really don't have to. No, I'm walking to your car. You need to let me walk you to your car. Then you kind of are like, oh, why are you treating me like this? Rather than like, hey, oh, you're walking out to your car? Hey, I'll come with you. Yeah. Like, oh, no, you really don't have to, Mathew. It's really fine. Okay. No, Angela, I'd really be happy to walk you out to your car. It's not like you're not telling them that you are, but you're just going to do it anyways. Okay. Okay. It's like,
Would asking be better?
You could ask, but a lot of times a girl's probably going to say no. So I kind of almost feel like, don't give them the opportunity to say no.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, because it's like, you just want to protect them that way.
Okay.
And you're just going to do it, but you're not you're like pushing yourself on them. It's just like, hey, you're walking into your car. I'm going to help you. I'm going to go out with you. Okay. Because I do think, like, a lot of times asking, because we are in a world of like, I'm supposed to be independent, I'm supposed to do all these things. Yep. If you give them the opportunity to say no, we probably are going to say no. And I know that I've had to even like force myself, because I want to be protected that way. I want to be provided that way. I want to believe that a man wants to do that for me, but you feel bad because you're like, he really doesn't have to. It's just down the street. I know it's a safe street. It's really not a big deal. And it's not a big deal, except that it's the principle of the thing of like, wow, somebody wanted to come and protect me that way. And like, that's a beautiful gift. And they felt strongly enough about it to the point where they were like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And it's not, and it doesn't have to be a big conversation, because that's the other part about it is, there's an energy that you bring to it. It can become a big show being like, I'm walking out your car, you're like, you need to let me. Yeah. That's now become maybe not about me, it's maybe posturing. About you now. Yeah, yeah. Rather than just like, oh, hey, I'm walking you out. Yeah. Just let that be the thing. I'm going to walk you to your car. Like, you really don't have to. Oh, well, you're still walking with me. Like, what am I going to do? I'll walk with you. Yeah. You know, I like so that. I just think, but there's a lot of opportunities that I do feel like men kind of need to do that now, because I do think women need to be protected, whether they let you or not, and provided for, and shown that they're valuable enough to do that for them. Yes. Here's the question. I totally agree. And this has been such a good conversation. This has been so good. I'm learning like so much right now. I have one more question about men's role in this equation, and I think we should switch to women's role. For guys, when it comes to dancing, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but I want to hear your take on this.
So with walking a woman to her car, it sounds like there's some room to be like, as long as you come with the right energy of like genuinely wanting to serve and being like, hey, are you going to your car? Awesome, I'll walk with you.
Yeah.
Like if you come with that sort of energy, that feels appropriate. And it also, like you said, it sort of circumvents the independent sort of mindset of, no, really, I'm fine, when in actuality, deep down, and not true for every woman necessarily, but in actuality, a lot of women would be honored by that gesture.
Yeah.
And would sort of evoke that femininity, like, wow, I'm treasured.
Yeah.
I'm like worth sacrificing for, even if it's something small like this.
Right.
It makes me feel good.
Absolutely.
When it comes to something like dancing, my gut tells me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, my gut tells me that walking up to a woman at a dance hall and being like, hey, let's dance, doesn't feel as clean, because it's like, it's a more intimate interaction. Like walking someone to their car is not as intimate as dancing is.
Okay.
And I feel like a question is appropriate there. And I love systems and formulas, and so if you tell me where the lines are, I will operate within the lines. So, but if there aren't lines, I'm curious.
Well, why are we afraid of that intimacy?
As men, or in general?
Like to walk up to a girl and say, hey, would you dance with me? Like,
the
why?
answer might be no. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I'm scared of it, for sure.
And if a woman says no to you, why is that such a big deal?
Because, and I know this is wrong. I know this is not
It's okay.
accurate.
I just actually really want to know what you experience.
I think there's two elements to it. One, I don't want to. Well, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, there's this fear of being rejected, where the no that I hear when I ask someone to dance has a subtext, which is not true, doesn't necessarily have to be true, but there's this subtext or implication of you're not good enough. And that hurts. And it sort of clashes with our identity, who we are in Christ. And that's something I struggle with. I like really struggle with putting myself out there sometimes, because I'm afraid that, I call it bouncing off people. Like whether it's asking someone to dance, whether it's asking or like trying to start up a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
I really struggle with that sometimes, because I'm afraid I'm just going to bounce off. Like I'm going to ask a cool question, be like, hey, do you want to dance? And the answer is going to be no, or the person's just going to sort of whee and go off somewhere else. And that sucks. But I also am like working more on that.
Yeah. Does this person know you? In this hypothetical scenario.
Not. Yeah, they probably know something about me, but not very intimately, I would say.
Okay. If you're walking up to a friend, she's probably going to say yes, right? Like, do you really think anybody in this group is going to be like, no, Mathew, I will not dance with you?
Maybe.
Probably not.
Okay.
You walk up to a stranger and she says no, she doesn't know you. So is that really a rejection of you yourself? Sure, there's a rejection of like
the facade that just walked up.
Immediately sees in front of her, but she doesn't see you. So I know that rejection can hurt, but I think that's one way that I've had to work around like rejection, in the sense of being like, but that person actually doesn't know me. So even though that's a hurt on a surface level, deep down I know that person doesn't know me. So it's really not a rejection of my person. Sure, if somebody I really care about is like, no, I'm not dancing with you, don't like you, yeah, that's a rejection of my person. Like, you know me, for some reason you don't want to be around me, you don't want to receive me. Gotcha. But in general, I think that you could be pretty confident in knowing that, like, if it's any of your friends or any girls you know, they're probably going to be fine with like dance with you. But also, even if they do, like, Mathew, men do not ask girls to dance. They just don't. So women need to be asked. They really need to be asked. And at the risk of you maybe having some people say no, I think this is really, again, another part of your role as leader, protector, and provider. I was listening to a talk by Focus Missionary years ago. Yeah. That really made that drove that point, is that he said the reason that men ask women out is because they're putting themselves in the position to be rejected rather than the girl. Yeah. Because guys say that to me all the time. They're like, Angela, why don't you just ask them out? I'm like, because it's such a beautiful thing that a man is man enough to say, look, I'm going to put myself out there so that you don't have to in that really direct way, because I know how much rejection hurts and I want to protect you from that. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, like, I'm not saying is easy, but that's the beauty of men becoming men, is learning to do the hard thing and to be courageous.
Yeah.
But the other side of this, and no guy ever seems to understand this point, and I've said it to a lot of them, they're like, no, Angela, it's just not the same. Okay, you might say I might be rejected by going up to a girl and asking her to dance.
Sure.
But when I go to dance, Mathew, and I stand by that dance floor and not a single man asks me to dance.
That hurts even worse.
That's a rejection from every man in the room. Sure, could I go up to a guy and ask him to dance? I could. Have I done that before? Sure. But again, it's like, I want so much
to be asked.
To live those feminine roles. Like, I really do think that there is something to women receiving, and to men, being the leaders and putting themselves out there. So if I want to live that role to receive, and men aren't leading, then I don't get to be as woman as I want to be, because now I feel like I have to go ask the guys. I have to put myself out there.
Which is putting yourself in the masculine role.
Yes, and
Gotcha.
I don't want to be a man.
But I'm glad that you're not.
Thank you. I am too. I like being a woman. But, and I will say, like, this is a conversation I've had a lot with a lot of guys too. Maybe you've heard.
This is beautiful, by the way. I'm, like, really enjoying this. Like, sincerely.
Me too. Mathew Hussey. Are you a Mathew Hussey? Okay.
Yeah.
I've frequently had guys bring him up and be like, but Angela, Mathew Hussey. And I do like a lot of the stuff he says. But one of the things that a lot of guys have kind of like, put themselves on is the like, but the women need to drop the handkerchief. Meaning girls have to drop more hints so the guy knows that she likes them. And I think that's true in a sense. So maybe that's the other side of it, of like, okay, maybe I'm standing there at the dance floor and I'm not making eye contact with any guy, or I'm not smiling at them. And that's true. I'm very bad at that, because I do think that's the other side that a woman feels, even though, yes, she might be the receiver, I have to still put myself out there in some way. I have to give them some sort of indication that, like, yeah, I would love for you to ask me to dance. And I am very bad about that. So I do have to challenge myself to do that. And it's really hard. Because, I might be like, I might go look at that guy and smile at him, and he just, like, turns around.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, awkward.
Yeah. I feel like that's a beautiful segue, and I've heard that idea before, and I've echoed it in other words. This idea of dropping the handkerchief. Do you believe in that, not only in the dancing space, but in other areas as well? Do you think that holds water, or?
I do. I mean, it's a give and a take. Like, I obviously, like, people want to know that they're desirable.
Yeah.
And that's not just women. Like, men need to know they're desirable too. But so if you have women constantly putting them down, or telling them they're not man enough, or not letting them take care of them, or not letting them be the man, or show them what they have to offer, like, we're constantly putting men down. So I think, and it's going to look different for men and women, like, I think for a woman, it's her openness. It's how does she interact? Is she, when a guy's trying to talk to her, is she actually opening herself up to talk to them? Because I've also seen that, which is always heartbreaking to me. I'm like, so many girls are just dying to be noticed. And then you see these girls, and a lot of times it is the girls that all the guys like, and they're so used to guys, like, fawning over them, they just kind of sit there, like, sort of glancing over, like, sort of giving the time of day, but I'm not. It's like, why? Like, this man is interested in you. Like, open yourself up to them. See what they have to offer.
Yeah.
Because that's going to keep encouraging them. But if men keep encountering that by the women that they're pursuing, then I think that does discourage men and be like, oh, I don't really have anything to offer. And it's something as simple as just, like, even from our beginning conversation of, like, are you just listening? Are you letting them talk to you? Are you looking them in the eye? Are you giving them the time of day? But also, like, I do think, and again, like, these are things I need to preach to myself. I think there are little ways of just, like, innocently letting them know that you're interested, like touching their arm, or, making it a point to talk to them, or being interested in what they have to say, or, I don't know, whatever it is. And I think it really just comes down to, like, I think people keep thinking dating is such a game, and it's like this, who's going to be more interested or less interested, and we all keep not putting ourselves out there because we don't want to be the one heartbroken.
Right.
But I really just firmly believe whether like, because everybody's so different. Like, I don't want to say it's like, oh, we all have to flirt so much so guys know that we like them.
Yeah.
But I just think if we all are really genuine, like, that's going to come through. So if I have the confidence to say, wow, I really like that guy, I want to be around him, and I'm not going to be afraid to show that. Sure, maybe I don't want to be a crazy person, like follow them around the room.
Right.
But like, when you get those opportunities, take them, or and make sure that they know that you valued their time.
That is those signals that you're talking about. I'm glad that we sort of brought it around to this. So it seems like those indications of interest could be, and it's not the only tool. Like, I like the receptivity emphasis as well. We'll come back to that, but this indication of interest, there's lots of different ways to show that. There's eye contact, there's distance to which you're like standing, or like posture with that you're using as you're talking towards a person. There's like touching someone on the arm or something like that. I think those are all ways of signaling that you like somebody. I mean, I've used them before too. Like, as a guy, I've used those things as well. And then I also think that the receptivity emphasis is really beautiful as well. And it's encouraging as a man to hear that, to know that what a woman really wants is to be like asked and invited, so that she can receive in a way that's like beautiful and gentle and like graceful and things like that. Is that sort of getting at the point? Yeah,
I think so. I don't even know if a lot of women realize that, but in my experience as a woman, that is absolutely what I'm looking for. It's like, I just want to know that I'm valuable enough to be desired and to be seen and to,
And if you pursue the right woman in the right way, if you, like, as a man, if I'm courageous and sort of bear the burden of like risking rejection so she doesn't have to, which I have heard before. It's been a minute since I've heard that one. I think that's the nail on the head for sure. But if I'm courageous and pursue and ask and invite, I think there's going to be instances where I don't get the result that I want. But I think when I do strike a chord with somebody, when I do find the right woman that I'm supposed to connect with, that she just by the act of me asking is going to be like opened just by that. Like, somebody was willing to risk this for me. Here I am.
No, and I've literally, I mean, I don't get asked out very much, but I know that I have had men that I wouldn't have thought of, but because they were like, hey, you seem like a really interesting person, I'd love to get to know you. And like immediately asked, I was like, well, absolutely, I'll give you the time. Like, I don't know you. Like, absolutely. I'm just like really impressed by the fact that they were just like, wow, I see something in you. That's always such a like compliment to me. To be like, oh, you saw me and you thought like I was worth
talking to.
The time to take me out to dinner or whatever it is. And I just think that like we just so fear that instead of just being open to what it could be. Like, I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk today, and somebody asked him, like, why he does what he does.
Okay.
And his answer was, to see what happens. I loved that.
Just see what happens.
To see what happens. It's like, literally, it's like, his views could be so controversial to so much of what the world believes today, but he didn't consult his fears. He was like, what could happen? This could go horribly, but it could also like change people's lives. And it has changed people's lives. So just thinking that on a daily basis of our choices of like, well, let me just do it and see what happens. I might be received, I might be rejected. But you know what? I might be received. There is that. It's not all downside. That's something that I need to remember too. But I love that idea of potentiality, where it's not all downside. It's not all
hey, there's all this negative stuff that could happen. Hey, there's a bunch of positive stuff that could happen too.
Yeah.
Another thing that's been helpful for me, I need to like internalize this more. Not every, like I think of this like a football game, right? Where you've got the ball on the whatever yard line. And if we're thinking about this, like the play that the offense is going to run in terms of potentiality, like I'm going to ask a girl out. I'm going to go ask her to dance. In my mind is very, very black and white, and I would wager that some other guys' minds are as well. In my mind, the only possibilities are I'm going to throw like a 45-yard pass and I'm going to score a touchdown and this lady's going to be my wife.
Yeah.
For sure. Or I'm going to ask and she's going to be like, you're a creep. Get away from me. The bouncer's going to come like pick me up with one arm and throw me outside, like loss of 20 yards. There's a lot of like incomplete passes and gain of one, loss of one.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle as well. Like I might dance for 2 songs with somebody and be like, hey, have a great night.
Yeah.
She might say, I have to go to the bathroom, but maybe later. And then she goes and I don't see her again. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of foul balls. There's a lot of mixed sports metaphors happening right now, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I get the idea.
And I think that takes some of the pressure off. Like not every interaction, not every invitation, and I'm speaking to myself as well as hopefully any men who are listening to this, not every invitation is like a do or die scenario. Yeah. Not every invitation is going to be a massive success or a massive failure. Yeah. You're going to hit a lot of foul balls too.
Yeah. And not every rejection, while it feels like a complete rejection of who you are, like I've had to teach myself this. Of like, I have to have the confidence that I know that I have something to offer, then I'm good, and then I'm a blessing to others. Yeah. Whether they see it or not. Yeah. And again, you're not going to force yourself on somebody, but just the fact that you've asked somebody is a blessing to them. Yeah. And so even that is like such a selfless act. Yeah. To say, okay, I might not get anything out of this because I might be rejected. I might actually like get something bad out of this in a sense. But like, honestly, like just honoring a woman by the fact that like you wanted to take the time to dance with her is beautiful. Yeah. And it's such a gift. And unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of women that don't see it that way. And we have a very strange world where, yes, people have had horrible experiences and, everybody comes with their human experience. Yep. So you don't know why she's rejecting you. You have no idea. She would have had a horrible experience the night before and just be like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't know. Or she's just a jerk and doesn't want to talk to you. Like, whatever. Yeah. But if she is a jerk, then you didn't want to dance with her anyway. Right. So I do think it's a lot of just coming out of ourselves to say, again, I can't control somebody else's reaction or response, but who do I want to be and what do I want to offer? And just keep putting yourself out there. And it's going to be hard and it takes a lot of courage, but I think it's so necessary because I think the more that people do that, the more other people will learn, will learn to receive, will learn to let a man treat, like the more good men that interact with these women, like might start breaking down those walls and those barriers. Yeah. And we need to keep doing that for each other. Yeah. So important.
Yeah. You might not be, and again, speaking to the men here, and I love this idea of like knowing that we're good regardless of the outcome. Like knowing, like for a woman standing on the side of a dance floor or something like that, knowing that she's good regardless of how many guys come up and ask her, or if none come up, or if all of them come up, like she's good no matter what. And for the guys also knowing that even if you walk up and you ask and she says no, you might have still taken a couple of bricks out of the wall, which is still a good thing in and of itself. Yeah. So it's really a no-lose scenario.
And you've strengthened yourself. Like you've challenged yourself to be courageous.
I put myself out there.
And the more that you do that, the easier it's going to become, and the less you're going to see it as a rejection. Just be like, okay, I did that. Like I'm a good man. I keep doing this, and this is what I need to keep doing. Yeah. And I feel like one thing that I keep coming back to when I've really just thought about dating is like, we have to have courage and we have to have kindness. Like, and I do feel like it's typically what I hear from guys is women are just not kind. And what I hear from girls is like, guys are just not courageous. And so it's just that like constantly, like I want that in every aspect of my life. I want to be courageous and I want to be kind. but especially in dating, because it's not easy, and our hearts are wrapped up in it, our emotions are wrapped up in it. There's so much that it is something just keep praying with the like, Lord, let me know that I'm valuable. Let me know that I have something to offer, and let me keep being the man or the woman that you're calling me to be. Yeah. And to keep being that regardless of how I'm received. Yeah. And let him do with it whatever he's going to do, because I just don't think you can lose that way, because it's good for everybody. And I think that's what we have to keep remembering. Like, if I'm not a woman, if I'm not living as a woman ought to and receiving the way that I ought to be, men aren't able to be men, and vice versa.
I think that is a beautiful sentiment, sort of just giving it to God, like knowing what we're supposed to do, and like leaving the rest in his hands. And I think that's a beautiful way to end. Yeah. So Angela, thank you again so much for being on the podcast and sharing your thoughts. I know you bless some people, so appreciate you.
Well, thank you. It's been a gift. I've really enjoyed it. Thank
and
you.
It's not too dark here. We can still sort of see each other. So
yeah.
see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Mathew.